The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand gates of Windsor Castle as Captain James Morrison adjusted his ceremonial uniform. 23 years of faithful service to the crown had taught him to read the subtle signs of trouble brewing within the royal walls. Today felt different. The usual calm that surrounded the Queen's private estate seemed disturbed. Like ripples on a still pond, Elizabeth Windsor, now in her final years, had retreated to her beloved private residence to spend her remaining time in peace. The doctors had been clear about her condition, though the public remained unaware of how fragile their monarch had become. Only a select few knew that the Queen's memory came and went like morning mist, and her strength diminished with each passing day. Captain Morrison had been personally chosen by the Queen herself to oversee the security of her private estate. It was an honor that weighed heavily on his shoulders, especially given the recent tensions within the royal family. The newspapers were full of speculation about succession, about who would inherit what, and about the growing rifts between family members. As he walked through the perfectly manicured gardens, Morrison noticed something unusual. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel near the side entrance, tracks that shouldn't have been there. The Queen's daily routine was carefully planned, and no vehicles were scheduled to arrive until the afternoon. His trained eye followed the tracks, noting how they led directly toward the main house rather than the usual parking area. Inside the estate, the Queen sat in her favorite chair by the window, watching the birds in her garden. Her mind was clearer today than it had been in weeks, a small blessing that came and went without warning. She remembered her childhood in this very room, remembered her coronation, remembered the weight of the crown both literally and figuratively. But increasingly the present felt foggy and uncertain. Her personal secretary, Margaret Chen, had been with her for 15 years and understood the Queen's condition better than anyone. Margaret noticed how the Queen's eyes would sometimes focus on something that wasn't there, or how she would ask for people who had passed away years ago. Today, however, the Queen seemed alert and aware, asking specific questions about her schedule and her estate. "Margaret," the Queen said softly, her voice still carrying the authority that had commanded respect for decades. "I've been thinking about my papers, the important ones in the safe. I want to review them today." Margaret nodded, understanding the significance. The Queen's private papers contained her personal will, detailed instructions about her most precious possessions, and letters she had written to her family members. These weren't state documents, but deeply personal items that revealed the woman behind the crown. The Queen had always been particular about who could access these papers, and Margaret was one of only 3 people who knew the combination to the private safe. Meanwhile, at the main entrance, Captain Morrison received a call that made his blood run cold. Security at the palace had received information about an unauthorized attempt to access the Queen's estate. The source was reliable, someone within the royal household who had overheard conversations that shouldn't have taken place. Someone was planning to visit the estate today without proper authorization, and their intentions weren't clear. Morrison immediately increased the alert level, though he did so quietly to avoid alarming the Queen. He positioned additional guards at strategic points around the estate and instructed his team to report any unusual activity immediately. His gut told him that today would test everything he had learned about protecting the royal family. As the morning progressed, the Queen's clarity of mind became even more pronounced. She asked Margaret to bring her personal photo albums, spending time looking at pictures of her late husband, her children, and her grandchildren. Some of the photos brought smiles to her weathered face, while others seemed to cause her pain. She lingered longest on a recent photo of her family gathered for Christmas, her finger tracing the faces of those she loved most. "Some people forget that even queens are mothers and grandmothers," she murmured to Margaret. "We love our families even when they disappoint us, even when they hurt us." Margaret recognized the sadness in the Queen's voice. The royal family's personal struggles had been particularly difficult for the Queen to bear in her final years. Public scandals, private disagreements, and the constant pressure of media attention had taken their toll on family relationships. The Queen often spoke about wanting to protect her legacy and ensure that her most precious possessions went to family members who would truly cherish them. Outside, Captain Morrison's radio crackled with an urgent message. A vehicle had been spotted approaching the estate from the rarely used back road. The license plate was registered to someone within the royal family, but the timing and route were suspicious. Morrison's training kicked in as he coordinated his team's response. Knowing that family members could pose just as much of a security risk as outsiders when emotions and inheritances were involved. The Queen, unaware of the developing situation outside, continued her reminiscing with Margaret. She spoke about her childhood treasures, jewelry that had been passed down through generations, and personal letters from world leaders that she considered historically significant. Most importantly, she talked about her desire to ensure these items went to family members who would preserve their meaning rather than simply their monetary value. As noon approached, the atmosphere around the estate grew tense. Captain Morrison positioned himself where he could observe both the main entrance and the approaching vehicle. His years of experience had taught him that family disputes could be the most dangerous situations of all, especially when vast fortunes and irreplaceable heirlooms were at stake. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test loyalties, reveal hidden intentions, and force everyone involved to choose between duty and personal interests. The Queen's peaceful morning was about to be shattered by forces beyond her control, but Captain Morrison was determined to protect both her person and her wishes, whatever the cost. The black Range Rover approached the estate with an urgency that immediately caught Captain Morrison's attention. Through his binoculars, he could see the familiar figure of Camilla, the Queen consort, behind the wheel. However, something about her demeanor and the unauthorized nature of her visit sent alarm bells ringing in his experienced mind. This wasn't a scheduled visit, and protocol demanded that all family visits be coordinated through proper channels, especially given the Queen's delicate condition. Morrison quickly radioed his team, positioning guards discreetly around the grounds while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. His instructions were clear: observe and report, but be ready to act if the situation escalated. The royal family's internal politics had become increasingly complex, and Morrison had witnessed enough heated exchanges to know that blood relations didn't guarantee peaceful intentions. Inside the estate, the Queen continued her conversation with Margaret, unaware of the approaching storm. Her mental clarity remained sharp, and she had begun dictating specific instructions about her personal belongings. These weren't items covered by official wills or state protocols, but deeply personal treasures that she wanted distributed according to her own wishes, rather than legal inheritance laws. The pearl necklace that belonged to my grandmother, the Queen said thoughtfully. I want that to go to Catherine. She understands the weight of tradition. Margaret nodded, carefully noting each instruction. The Queen's personal collection included items of immense historical and monetary value, pieces that had been acquired over decades of state visits, personal gifts from world leaders, and family heirlooms that predated the current royal line. Camilla's vehicle came to an abrupt stop near the side entrance, the same entrance that had left the mysterious tire tracks Morrison had discovered earlier. She emerged from the car with determined strides, carrying a large handbag and what appeared to be a folder of documents. Her usual composed public demeanor was replaced by something more intense, more urgent. She moved toward the estate with the confidence of someone who believed they had every right to be there. Captain Morrison intercepted her path, his approach professional but firm. Your Majesty, he said, using her official title while maintaining the respect due to her position, I wasn't informed of your visit today. I'll need to check the schedule and coordinate with Her Majesty's staff. Camilla's response was swift and dismissive. I don't need an appointment to visit my family, Captain. This is urgent family business that cannot wait for bureaucratic procedures. Her tone carried an edge that Morrison had rarely heard from her before, suggesting that whatever brought her here today was of extreme importance to her personally. I understand, Your Majesty, but given Her Majesty's condition, all visits must be carefully coordinated to ensure her well-being, Morrison replied, not moving from his position, blocking her path. His years of diplomatic training within the royal household had taught him how to be respectful while remaining absolutely firm when security was concerned. The confrontation escalated quickly as Camilla insisted that her visit was sanctioned by higher authorities. Though she couldn't produce any documentation to support her claim, Morrison's suspicions deepened when he noticed that she seemed unusually interested in the building's layout, asking specific questions about which rooms the Queen was currently using and where certain items might be stored. Inside, Margaret noticed the Queen becoming agitated, though she couldn't identify the source of her distress. Years of caring for the monarch had taught Margaret to recognize the subtle signs when something was troubling the Queen, even when her memory was compromised. Today, however, the Queen's awareness seemed heightened, as if some instinct was warning her of approaching danger. "Margaret," the Queen said suddenly, her voice carrying an unusual urgency. "I want to see my private safe now. Something doesn't feel right today." The request surprised Margaret, as the Queen rarely asked to access her most secure storage during her clearer moments. Usually, these requests came during her confused episodes, when she worried about imaginary threats to her possessions. As Margaret helped the Queen to the secure room where her private safe was located, they could hear raised voices from outside. The Queen's hearing, despite her age, remained sharp enough to detect the tension in the distant conversation. Her eyes, suddenly alert and focused, met Margaret's with a clarity that had been absent for weeks. Outside, the situation between Morrison and Camilla had reached a stalemate. She demanded immediate access to the Queen, claiming urgent family matters that couldn't wait. Morrison, following established protocols, insisted on verifying her visit through proper channels before allowing entry. The tension was palpable as both parties held their ground, each believing they were acting in the Queen's best interests. Camilla's frustration became increasingly apparent as she made several phone calls, trying to reach someone who could authorize her immediate access. Morrison noted that her calls seemed to go unanswered, which only strengthened his resolve to maintain security protocols. His experience had taught him that unauthorized visits, especially those accompanied by such emotional intensity, often concealed motives that weren't in the Queen's best interests. The Queen, now standing before her private safe, seemed to be gathering strength from some inner reserve. Her fingers moved with surprising steadiness as she began to work the combination lock, her muscle memory intact despite her recent mental fog. Margaret watched in amazement as the Queen's demeanor transformed from frail elderly woman to the decisive monarch she had been for decades. "There are people who believe that age makes us weak." "Margaret," the Queen said as the safe door swung open, revealing neat stacks of documents, jewelry boxes, and personal letters. "They forget that we've survived decades of challenges that would break younger people. Today I feel every one of my years, but I also feel the strength they've given me." Captain Morrison's radio crackled with updates from his team positioned around the estate. Camilla had been joined by two other individuals who had arrived in a separate vehicle, though they remained in the background. The nature of their presence was unclear, but Morrison's instincts told him that this was no simple family visit. The coordination of multiple arrivals suggested planning and purpose that went beyond casual family interaction. As the standoff continued, Morrison made a crucial decision. He would allow Camilla to see the Queen, but under strict supervision and with limited access to the estate. This compromise would satisfy protocol while potentially revealing the true nature of her urgent visit. However, he also quietly signaled his team to maintain heightened alert status, ready to intervene if the situation took a dangerous turn. The Queen, meanwhile, had begun removing specific items from her safe, handling each with the reverence due to objects of immense personal and historical significance. Margaret realized that the Queen was preparing for something, though the exact nature of her preparations remained unclear. The elderly monarch's sudden burst of energy and clarity suggested that she sensed the approaching confrontation and was readying herself for whatever lay ahead. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as Captain Morrison escorted Camilla toward the main house. His trained eyes noticed every detail of her behavior, the way she clutched her handbag tightly, how her eyes darted toward different windows of the estate, and most concerning, how she seemed to be mentally mapping the building's layout. These weren't the actions of someone making a simple family visit. Camilla's two companions remained by their vehicle, but Morrison's team kept them under discreet surveillance. Through his earpiece, he received regular updates about their activities. They appeared to be waiting for some kind of signal, occasionally checking their phones and scanning the estate grounds. Their presence added another layer of complexity to an already tense situation. Inside the private room, the Queen continued her methodical examination of her safe's contents. Each item she removed seemed to carry enormous personal significance. Margaret watched in fascination as the Queen handled a small leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. The Queen opened it carefully, revealing handwritten notes in her own careful script, documenting personal thoughts and decisions that had never been shared with the public. This contains my real thoughts about family matters. Margaret, the Queen said softly, her voice carrying the weight of decades of carefully guarded secrets. Not the diplomatic statements for public consumption, but my genuine feelings about each family member's character, their strengths, and their weaknesses. The implications of such a document were staggering, as it could potentially influence inheritance decisions and family dynamics for generations. As Morrison and Camilla approached the main entrance, the captain made a strategic decision. Instead of taking her directly to the Queen's current location, he guided her to the formal receiving room. This would allow him to control the environment and observe her reactions while protecting the Queen's private spaces. The receiving room also had multiple exit points and better security monitoring, essential factors given his growing concerns about Camilla's true intentions. "I'll inform Her Majesty of your arrival," Morrison said formally, his tone professional but cautious. "Please wait here while I coordinate with her staff." Camilla's impatience was evident as she paced the elegant room, her eyes constantly moving to the ornate cabinets and display cases that housed some of the Queen's personal collection. Her behavior suggested she was cataloging items rather than simply waiting for a family meeting. The Queen, meanwhile, had found what she was searching for in her safe. A sealed envelope, addressed in her own handwriting with instructions that it should only be opened under specific circumstances. Margaret recognized the envelope as one the Queen had prepared months earlier, during one of her clearer periods when she had grown concerned about potential challenges to her final wishes. "Margaret, I need you to understand something very important," the Queen said, her voice carrying an authority that had commanded nations for decades. "There are family members who believe they can influence my decisions because of my condition. They underestimate both my awareness and my resolve." The Queen's eyes, now sharp and focused, met Margaret's directly. "Today I suspect we will discover who truly respects my wishes and who sees only opportunity in my perceived weakness," Captain Morrison returned, to check on Camilla and found her examining a particular display case with intense interest. The case contained several pieces of the Queen's personal jewelry collection, items that weren't part of the crown jewels, but were nonetheless extraordinarily valuable. When Camilla noticed Morrison's return, she quickly moved away from the case, but not before he observed her taking notes in a small notebook. "Her Majesty will see you shortly," Morrison informed her, though he had no intention of allowing unsupervised access. "However, I should mention that she's having a particularly clear day mentally, so she's quite aware of her surroundings and circumstances." This statement was both a warning and a test, designed to gauge Camilla's reaction to the news that the Queen might not be as vulnerable as expected. Camilla's response was telling. Instead of expressing pleasure that the Queen was having a good day, her face showed what could only be described as disappointment, quickly masked by a forced smile. "Of course, I'm delighted to hear she's feeling well," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Morrison filed this reaction away as another piece of evidence supporting his growing suspicions about her motives. The Queen had begun placing specific items from her safe into a secure bag, each choice deliberate and meaningful. The leather journal, several pieces of correspondence, and a small collection of jewelry that held particular sentimental value. Margaret realized that the Queen was preparing for some kind of confrontation, gathering evidence or items that would support whatever stand she planned to make. "There's something you should know, Margaret," the Queen continued, her voice growing stronger with each moment of clarity. "I've been more aware of recent events than people realize. The conversations that family members think I can't hear, the discussions about my possessions, the assumptions about my mental state. Today feels like the day when pretenses will be dropped and true intentions revealed." Outside, Morrison's team reported that Camilla's companions were becoming increasingly restless. They had been joined by a third person, someone who appeared to be carrying legal documents. This development heightened Morrison's concerns significantly, as it suggested that whatever was planned might involve formal legal proceedings or challenges to the Queen's authority over her own possessions. Morrison made a crucial decision to delay the meeting further, claiming that the Queen needed additional time to prepare for the visit. This would give him opportunity to gather more information about Camilla's companions and their potential role in whatever was unfolding. His years of experience had taught him that in situations involving royal family dynamics, patience and careful observation often prevented serious complications. The Queen, now fully prepared with her selected items, asked Margaret to help her return to her favorite chair by the window. However, instead of her usual frail movement, she walked with purpose and dignity, every inch the monarch who had ruled for decades. Her transformation was remarkable, as if the approaching challenge had awakened reserves of strength that had been dormant during her recent difficult period. "Margaret," the Queen said, as she settled into her chair, the secure bag of items within easy reach. "I want you to remember everything that happens today. Every word, every action, every expression. There may come a time when your testimony about these events becomes very important." The weight of this responsibility wasn't lost on Margaret, who realized she was about to witness something that could have far-reaching consequences for the royal family. As the afternoon sun reached its peak, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test family loyalties, reveal hidden agendas, and ultimately determine whether the Queen's final wishes would be respected or challenged by those who should have been protecting her legacy. The moment of truth arrived when Captain Morrison finally escorted Camilla into the Queen's presence. The contrast between the two women was striking. Camilla appeared tense and determined, while the Queen sat with the composed dignity that had defined her reign. Margaret remained in the room, positioned where she could observe everything while staying respectfully in the background. "Your Majesty," Camilla began, her voice carrying a forced warmth that didn't quite mask her underlying urgency. "I hope you're feeling well today. I've come to discuss some important family matters that require your immediate attention." Her eyes quickly scanned the room, taking note of the secure bag beside the Queen's chair and the alert expression on the monarch's face. The Queen's response was measured and deliberate. "Camilla, dear, how unexpected to see you today. I wasn't aware we had scheduled any meetings." Her voice carried the subtle authority that had commanded respect from world leaders for decades, making it clear that despite her recent struggles, she remained fully capable of conducting her own affairs. Morrison positioned himself strategically near the door, where he could monitor the conversation, while maintaining radio contact with his team outside. His earpiece crackled softly with updates about Camilla's companions, who were now openly displaying what appeared to be legal documents and making phone calls to unknown parties. Camilla's approach became more direct as she realized that subtlety wouldn't work with a fully alert Queen. "Your Majesty, I've been concerned about the security of your personal effects. Given your recent health challenges, I think it would be wise to ensure that your most valuable possessions are properly secured and documented." She gestured toward her handbag, which Morrison now suspected contained documents related to this supposed security concern. The Queen's eyes sharpened as she recognized the true nature of the visit. "I appreciate your concern, Camilla, but I assure you that my personal effects are quite secure. I've made very specific arrangements for their care and distribution, arrangements that I'm perfectly capable of overseeing myself." Her tone remained polite but carried an unmistakable edge that warned against further presumption. Margaret watched the exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't a social visit or even a genuine concern for the Queen's welfare. Camilla was attempting to gain access to or control over the Queen's personal possessions, possibly believing that the monarch's recent mental struggles had left her vulnerable to manipulation. Camilla pressed forward with her agenda, producing a folder from her handbag. "I've taken the liberty of consulting with some legal experts about the best ways to protect your legacy. They've prepared some documents that would ensure your possessions receive proper protection." She moved to place the folder on the table beside the Queen's chair, but the monarch's sharp gesture stopped her. "I have not requested any legal consultation regarding my personal affairs," the Queen stated firmly. "My solicitors handle any matters that require legal attention, and they have my complete confidence. I'm curious about who gave you the authority to seek outside legal advice on my behalf." The question hung in the air like a challenge, demanding an answer that Camilla seemed reluctant to provide. Captain Morrison's suspicions crystallized as he observed Camilla's reaction to the Queen's resistance. This was clearly not the vulnerable, confused elderly woman that Camilla had expected to encounter. The Queen's mental clarity and firm responses were disrupting whatever plan had been set in motion. creating visible frustration in Camilla's demeanor. The Queen reached for her secure bag, removing the leather journal she had retrieved from her safe. "Since you're so concerned about my mental state, Camilla, perhaps you'd be interested to know that I've been keeping detailed records of recent events. My memory, you see, is far more reliable than some people assume." She opened the journal to a recent entry, her fingers steady despite her age. Camilla's composure began to crack as she realized the implications of the Queen's statement. "Your Majesty, I never suggested that your mental state was compromised. I'm simply trying to help ensure that your wishes are properly documented and protected." Her protest sounded hollow, especially given the unauthorized legal documents she had attempted to present. Morrison's earpiece delivered an urgent update. Camilla's companions had been joined by additional individuals, and they appeared to be preparing to enter the estate. This development suggested that whatever was planned was more complex than a simple attempt to influence the Queen's decisions about her possessions. The Queen continued reading from her journal, her voice clear and strong. "I have here detailed notes about conversations I've overheard, discussions about the value of my personal collection, and speculations about my mental capacity to make decisions about my own property." She looked directly at Camilla. "I find it fascinating how people assume that age automatically equals incompetence." Margaret marveled at the Queen's strategic approach. By revealing her awareness of the situation, she was effectively dismantling any arguments about her mental incapacity, while simultaneously exposing the true motives behind this visit. The Queen had clearly been planning for this confrontation, using her perceived weakness as a shield while gathering intelligence about potential threats to her autonomy. Camilla made one final attempt to regain control of the situation. "Your Majesty, regardless of your current clarity, it would be prudent to have proper legal protections in place for times when you might not be feeling as sharp. These documents would only provide additional security for your wishes." She again moved to present the legal folder, her persistence revealing the importance of whatever those documents contained. The Queen's response was swift and definitive. "Camilla, I am perfectly capable of determining when and if I need additional legal protections. The fact that you've brought unauthorized legal documents to my private residence without my knowledge or consent raises serious questions about your motives and judgment." Her words carried the full weight of royal authority, making it clear that this breach of protocol would not be tolerated. Morrison stepped forward, his professional instincts fully engaged. The situation had reached a point where his intervention was necessary to protect both the Queen's wishes and her physical security. The revelation that Camilla had come with prepared legal documents, combined with the presence of additional individuals outside, suggested a coordinated effort to challenge the Queen's control over her own affairs. The Queen placed her journal back in the secure bag, her movements deliberate and meaningful. "Captain Morrison, I believe this visit has concluded. Please escort our guest to the exit and ensure that her companions understand that they are not welcome on my property without proper authorization." Her dismissal was absolute, delivered with the authority of someone who had spent decades making decisions that affected nations. The confrontation had reached its climax, with the Queen's mental clarity and preparedness completely disrupting whatever plan had been set in motion. The true test, however, would be whether those involved would accept her decision or attempt to escalate their challenge to her authority. Camilla's reaction to the Queen's dismissal was immediate and revealing. Instead of accepting the decision with grace, her composure completely crumbled. "Your Majesty, you're making a serious mistake. These legal protections are for your own benefit, and refusing them could have serious consequences for your legacy." Her voice had risen significantly, and the desperation in her tone confirmed Morrison's worst suspicions about her true intentions. Captain Morrison stepped closer to Camilla, his presence a clear signal that the Queen's decision was final. "Your Majesty has made her wishes clear," he said firmly. "I must ask you to respect her decision and leave the premises immediately." His hand moved instinctively toward his radio, ready to call for additional support if the situation escalated further. The Queen remained seated, but her posture radiated authority and determination. "Camilla, I've lived through decades of people trying to manipulate me for their own purposes. Age may have weakened my body, but it has sharpened my ability to recognize deception and self-interest disguised as concern." Her words cut through the air like a blade, exposing the hollow nature of Camilla's supposed concern for her welfare. Margaret watched in amazement as the Queen continued to demonstrate the mental acuity and strength that had defined her reign. It was clear that the recent months of appearing confused and vulnerable had been partially strategic, allowing her to observe and evaluate the true character of those around her without their knowledge. Camilla made one final, desperate attempt to salvage her mission. "Your Majesty, my legal advisors are waiting outside. They've traveled a long distance specifically to help you with these matters. Surely you can spare a few minutes to hear their recommendations." Her persistence in the face of clear rejection revealed the significant investment that had been made in this effort to influence the Queen's decisions. The Queen's response was devastating in its simplicity. "I did not invite any legal advisors to my home, and I have no interest in hearing recommendations from people whose authority I do not recognize." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "The fact that you brought them here without my permission demonstrates a fundamental lack of respect for my autonomy and judgment." Morrison's earpiece crackled with urgent updates from his team. Camilla's companions were becoming increasingly agitated, and one of them was attempting to approach the main house despite being told to remain at their vehicle. The situation outside was escalating, suggesting that those involved were not prepared to accept the Queen's rejection of their plans. The Queen reached into her secure bag and removed a sealed envelope, the same one she had prepared months earlier for exactly this type of situation. "Margaret, please witness this," she said clearly. "I am reaffirming my complete mental competency and my absolute authority over my personal affairs. Any attempts to circumvent my wishes or challenge my decisions should be considered invalid and potentially fraudulent." Camilla's eyes fixed on the envelope with obvious alarm. "Your Majesty, there's no need for such dramatic measures. I'm simply trying to help ensure that your interests are protected." Her protest rang hollow, especially given her earlier insistence on presenting unauthorized legal documents. Morrison made a tactical decision to end the confrontation before it could escalate further. "Your Majesty," he addressed Camilla formally, "I'm going to escort you to your vehicle now. Your companions need to leave the premises immediately, and any further attempts to access this estate without proper authorization will be treated as trespassing." The Queen's voice carried across the room with unmistakable finality. "Camilla, you came here today believing you would find a confused, vulnerable old woman whom you could manipulate for your own purposes. Instead, you found the same person who has been making difficult decisions for over 70 years. I suggest you remember that in any future interactions." As Morrison guided Camilla toward the exit, she made several attempts to protest the decision, each one revealing more about her true motives. Her references to family interests and protecting the Crown's assets made it clear that her concern was not for the Queen's welfare but for gaining access to or control over valuable possessions that would normally be distributed according to the Queen's personal wishes, rather than legal inheritance laws. Outside, the situation had indeed escalated. Camilla's companions were arguing with Morrison's security team, demanding access to the estate and insisting that they had legal authority to conduct business with the Queen. Their aggressive behavior validated Morrison's decision to maintain strict security protocols and demonstrated the wisdom of the Queen's refusal to meet with them. Margaret remained with the Queen, who had opened the sealed envelope and was reviewing its contents. The document inside appeared to be a comprehensive statement of her mental competency, witnessed and notarized during one of her clearer periods months earlier. The Queen had been preparing for this type of challenge far longer than anyone had realized. "Margaret," the Queen said softly, her voice carrying both sadness and determination, "family relationships become complicated when substantial wealth and prestige are involved. Today has confirmed some of my worst fears about certain family members' priorities." She carefully returned the document to the envelope, sealing it again with a small amount of wax from a candle on the nearby table. Morrison's firm but professional handling of Camilla's departure demonstrated his years of experience in managing difficult situations within the royal family. He escorted her to her vehicle while maintaining radio contact with his team, ensuring that all of her companions understood that their presence was no longer welcome on the estate. Camilla's final words before entering her vehicle were telling. "This isn't over. There are legal procedures that can be followed when family members are concerned about an elderly relative's decision-making capacity. Her threat was barely veiled, suggesting that the rejection of today's approach might lead to more formal legal challenges to the Queen's autonomy. Morrison watched until all the vehicles had left the estate before returning to brief the Queen on the security measures he was implementing. The attempted manipulation had failed, but it had also revealed the existence of organized efforts to challenge the Queen's control over her personal affairs. This knowledge would require enhanced security protocols and careful monitoring of future family interactions. The Queen, meanwhile, had returned her secure items to their bag and was sitting quietly by the window, watching the gardens where she had spent so many peaceful hours. The confrontation had taken its toll, but her victory was complete. She had demonstrated that age and occasional mental fog did not equate to vulnerability or incompetence, and she had sent a clear message about her continued authority over her own life and possessions. The afternoon's events had revealed the true character of those involved and set the stage for whatever legal or family challenges might follow. But the Queen's position was now unassailable, supported by documented evidence of her mental competency and witnessed by trusted staff members. In the days following Camilla's failed attempt to access the Queen's estate, the aftermath revealed the true scope of what had been planned. Captain Morrison's investigation, conducted with the discretion befitting royal family matters, uncovered a coordinated effort involving several individuals outside the immediate family circle. Legal documents had been prepared in advance, suggesting weeks or months of planning based on assumptions about the Queen's mental vulnerability. The Queen's daily routine resumed its peaceful rhythm, but with enhanced security measures that Morrison implemented without disrupting her comfort. Additional background checks were conducted on all staff members, and new protocols were established for any unscheduled family visits. The captain's respect for the Queen had grown immensely after witnessing her strategic handling of the confrontation, recognizing that her apparent periods of confusion had provided valuable intelligence about potential threats to her autonomy. Margaret found herself in the unique position of being one of the few people who had witnessed the Queen's masterful demonstration of mental acuity and strategic thinking. The elderly monarch had confided in her about months of careful observation and documentation, revealing that her moments of seeming confusion were often opportunities to gather information about people's true intentions when they believed she wasn't fully aware of their conversations. The Queen's personal physician, Dr. Robert Sterling, arrived for his weekly visit 3 days after the incident. He had been treating the Queen for several years and was one of the few people who understood the complex nature of her condition. Her mental state fluctuated unpredictably, with periods of remarkable clarity interspersed with times when her memory and awareness became clouded. What made her case unique was her ability to recognize and compensate for these fluctuations. During Dr. Sterling's examination, the Queen discussed the recent confrontation with clinical objectivity. "Doctor, I find it fascinating how people assume that any sign of mental struggle means complete incapacity. They forget that I've been managing complex situations for decades, and that experience doesn't simply disappear because I occasionally forget someone's name or lose track of time." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "Your Majesty, your case is quite remarkable. While you do experience periods of cognitive difficulty, your core judgment and decision-making abilities remain intact. More importantly, you've developed compensatory strategies that actually enhance your ability to assess people's motivations." His professional opinion would prove crucial if legal challenges to the Queen's competency were ever formally pursued. Captain Morrison had compiled a comprehensive report about the security breach, documenting every aspect of Camilla's unauthorized visit and the behavior of her companions. The report would serve as evidence if formal complaints were filed or if legal proceedings were initiated. His years of experience had taught him that family disputes involving substantial inheritances often escalated beyond initial confrontations. Then the Queen spent considerable time reviewing her personal affairs with Margaret, ensuring that all her wishes were properly documented and witnessed. She had learned from the recent attempt that her perceived vulnerability made her a target for those who believed they could influence her decisions. Her response was to create multiple layers of legal protection for her final wishes, making any future challenges extremely difficult to pursue successfully. Word of the confrontation had somehow leaked to other family members, though the exact source remained unclear. The Queen began receiving phone calls from various relatives, each expressing concern for her welfare, while carefully probing for information about her mental state and her plans for her personal possessions. These conversations confirmed her suspicions that Camilla's visit had been part of a broader effort to assess and potentially exploit her condition. Margaret observed how the Queen handled these family inquiries with diplomatic skill, revealing nothing about the recent incident while gathering information about which family members might be involved in questioning her competency. Each conversation was a delicate balance of maintaining family relationships while protecting her own interests and autonomy. The Queen's solicitor, Sir James Pemberton, made an unscheduled visit to review and update her legal documents. He had served the royal family for over 20 years and understood the unique challenges they faced when personal family matters intersected with public responsibilities. His expertise in both royal protocol and inheritance law made him invaluable in strengthening the Queen's legal position. During their meeting, Sir James expressed his professional admiration for how the Queen had handled the attempted manipulation. "Your Majesty, your documentation of recent events and your strategic response to this challenge have created an exceptionally strong legal foundation. Any future attempts to question your competency would face substantial evidence to the contrary." The Queen's mood had improved significantly since successfully defending her autonomy. Margaret noticed that her periods of mental clarity were becoming more frequent and sustained, as if the victory had energized her and strengthened her resolve to maintain control over her remaining years. The stress of uncertainty about potential challenges to her authority had been replaced by confidence in her ability to protect her interests. Captain Morrison received intelligence through unofficial channels that Camilla and her associates were consulting with additional legal experts, seeking alternative approaches to challenge the Queen's control over her personal estate. This information prompted him to expand his security assessment to include potential legal threats as well as physical ones, coordinating with the royal family's legal team to ensure comprehensive protection. The Queen made a strategic decision to invite certain trusted family members for individual visits, using these opportunities to reinforce her mental competency, while subtly communicating that any attempts to circumvent her wishes would be met with firm resistance. These carefully orchestrated meetings served multiple purposes: maintaining important family relationships, demonstrating her continued authority, and gathering intelligence about potential allies and threats. Margaret had become an unofficial guardian of the Queen's reputation, carefully documenting her daily activities and mental state to provide evidence of her continued competency if needed. The Queen appreciated this protection, understanding that Margaret's testimony could be crucial in any future legal proceedings, challenging her right to make decisions about her own affairs. As the immediate crisis passed, the Queen reflected on the broader implications of what had occurred. The attempt to manipulate her during a perceived period of vulnerability had revealed important truths about family dynamics and the corrupting influence of substantial wealth on personal relationships. Her successful defense had not only protected her immediate interests but had also established precedents for how similar challenges would be addressed in the future. The enhanced security, measures, and legal protections that resulted from the confrontation had transformed the Queen's estate into a fortress of personal autonomy, ensuring that her final years would be lived according to her own wishes, rather than the ambitions of those who sought to exploit her age and occasional confusion for their own benefit. 3 weeks after the confrontation, the Queen's estate had settled into a new rhythm of enhanced security and renewed purpose. The attempted manipulation had paradoxically strengthened the Queen's resolve and clarified her priorities for her remaining time. Captain Morrison's protective measures had evolved beyond simple physical security to include comprehensive monitoring of all communications and visits, creating an environment where the Queen could live peacefully without fear of further exploitation. Attempts. The legal ramifications of Camilla's actions began to unfold when Sir James Pemberton received formal notice that a petition had been filed questioning the Queen's mental competency to manage her personal affairs. The petition, supported by several affidavits from individuals claiming concern for the Queen's welfare, sought to establish a legal guardianship that would transfer control of her personal estate to designated family members. The Queen's response to this legal challenge was swift and decisive. Armed with Dr. Sterling's comprehensive medical evaluation, Morrison's detailed security report, and Margaret's documented observations of her daily competency, she authorized Sir James to file a counter-petition that not only refuted the competency claims but also raised questions about the motives and coordination behind the original challenge. Margaret had become an expert witness to the Queen's mental state, having documented dozens of instances where the monarch demonstrated clear thinking, strategic planning, and sophisticated understanding of complex issues. Her testimony would prove crucial in any competency hearing, as she could provide first-hand evidence of the Queen's continued ability to make informed decisions about her personal affairs. Captain Morrison's investigation had uncovered financial connections between some of Camilla's associates and investment firms that specialized in managing high-value estates. This discovery suggested that the attempted manipulation had been motivated not just by family interests but by potential financial gains for outside parties who stood to benefit from managing the Queen's substantial personal wealth. The Queen made a strategic decision to invite several neutral medical experts to conduct independent evaluations of her mental state. These assessments, performed by physicians with no previous connection to the royal family, would provide unbiased professional opinions about her competency. The results were unequivocally supportive of her continued autonomy, with each expert noting her remarkable cognitive abilities despite her advanced age. Dr. Sterling's detailed medical report became a cornerstone of the Queen's legal defense. His documentation showed that while she experienced periodic episodes of memory difficulty and confusion, these incidents did not impair her fundamental decision-making abilities or her understanding of complex issues. More importantly, his report emphasized her development of compensatory strategies that actually enhanced her ability to assess situations and people accurately. The Queen's family relationships underwent significant changes as the legal challenge progressed. Some relatives rallied to support her autonomy, recognizing the dangerous precedent that would be set if elderly family members could be declared incompetent based on occasional confusion. Others remained conspicuously silent, their neutrality revealing more about their priorities than active opposition would have. Margaret witnessed the Queen's transformation during this period, observing how the challenge to her competency had awakened reserves of strength and determination that had been dormant during her recent health struggles. The elderly monarch approached each day with renewed purpose, determined to prove that age and occasional mental fog did not equate to incompetence or vulnerability to manipulation. The legal proceedings revealed the sophisticated nature of the plot against the Queen's autonomy. Evidence emerged of months of planning, including surveillance of her daily routines, consultation with legal experts specializing in competency challenges, and coordination with financial advisors who had prepared detailed plans for managing her estate. The scope of the conspiracy validated Morrison's initial suspicions and justified his aggressive security response. Public awareness of the legal challenge created an unexpected wave of support for the Queen's position. Letters poured in from elderly citizens who identified with her struggle to maintain autonomy in the face of family members who assumed that age automatically meant incompetence. This grassroots support provided emotional strength for the Queen while creating public pressure for a fair resolution of the legal dispute. The Queen's counter-petition included a comprehensive plan for the distribution of her personal possessions, demonstrating not only her competency, but also her thoughtful consideration of how her belongings should be allocated among family members based on their personal significance rather than monetary value. This document showcased her continued ability to make complex, nuanced decisions about emotionally charged issues. Sir James Pemberton's legal strategy proved masterful as he systematically dismantled the competency challenge. His presentation of evidence included video recordings of the Queen conducting complex business meetings, detailed documentation of her strategic thinking during the confrontation with Camilla, and expert testimony about her remarkable cognitive abilities. The case became a model for defending elderly individuals against unfounded competency challenges. Captain Morrison received recognition from Royal Security Headquarters for his handling of the situation, with his approach being adopted as a new protocol for protecting elderly royals from family-based threats. His understanding that security threats could come from within the family rather than from outside. Sources had prevented a serious breach of the Queen's autonomy and personal security. The final resolution came when the original petitioners withdrew their competency challenge in the face of overwhelming evidence supporting the Queen's mental acuity. The withdrawal included formal acknowledgments that their concerns had been based on incomplete information and misunderstandings about the nature of her condition. This outcome vindicated the Queen's position while establishing important legal precedents for future cases. In the months that followed, the Queen's health actually improved, as if the successful defense of her autonomy had provided psychological and emotional benefits that translated into physical well-being. Her periods of confusion became less frequent, and her overall engagement with daily activities increased significantly. The victory had proven that maintaining control over one's life could be therapeutic in itself. The Queen's legacy was ultimately enhanced by her successful resistance to manipulation and exploitation. She had demonstrated that wisdom and experience could overcome apparent vulnerability, and that age-related challenges did not automatically mean loss of autonomy. Her courage in defending her rights inspired countless other elderly individuals facing similar challenges from family members who mistook aging for incompetence. Margaret continued her dedicated service with even greater respect for the Queen's character and abilities. The confrontation had revealed depths of strength and strategic thinking that transformed her understanding of the monarch's true capabilities. Their relationship evolved into one of mutual respect between two women who had successfully defended important principles against significant opposition. The estate returned to its peaceful routine, but with the security of knowing that the Queen's autonomy was legally protected and that any future challenges would face the precedent of her successful defense. Captain Morrison maintained enhanced security protocols, ensuring that the Queen could enjoy her remaining years with the dignity and independence she had fought so hard to preserve.